Before I became America's favorite voice actor, I did a job for about 2 years that pretty much drives everyone that does it insane, for 3 reasons. 1 is that in order to do it, you can't think like a normal person anymore. 2 is the routine is absolutely insane. And 3rd is the money. I'm going to tell you some stuff you probably don't know about the world of stand-up comedy after I show you how I got into it.
I work in a radio station. I'm in a little booth by myself. It's just me and a microphone and the assumption that everybody out there thinks I'm the funniest freaking thing they've ever heard. I was kind of scared to put that to the test, so I called my dad. And I was like, Dad, what do you think? You think I can do stand-up comedy? You think I can get out there? And he's like, hey, you know what the hell? Worst thing that can happen is that no one will laugh. See, it's happening right now. He's like, yeah, that's the worst thing. No one will laugh. So I decided to go to this open mic night thing. And I get like 5 seconds into my set, and there's this guy in the back of the room, and he's like, you suck! I'm like, oh! That was way worse than not getting laughed at. Dad's an asshole.
The first thing that makes doing stand-up comedy so bizarre and difficult is the fact that you have to train yourself to not think like anybody else. If you've ever seen the Jerry Seinfeld show, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, he literally says that he doesn't like talking to anyone that's not a comedian. Reason is because comedians have completely wired themselves to think unlike anybody else. And in order to come up with enough material, you're doing it constantly, all day, every day, and kind of tuning out from the regular world. The comedian Mitch Hedberg had a bit saying something like, if I think of something funny in the middle of the night, I gotta get up and find a pen to write it down, or convince myself that what I thought of wasn't that funny. And the really true part about that statement is the fact that you are constantly, middle of the night, middle of the day, always trying to think of something funny. You need to fill up a whole set, you need jokes. And I remember when I was doing stand-up, I was kind of tuned out a lot. Instead of being present in conversations with friends and people that were around me, I was always kind of like trying to think of the different angle, like what could be funny about this? How could I tell this as a joke? And one of the other weird side effects of that is sometimes the comedy gets to be really inappropriate. Inappropriately timed, inappropriate comedy. Comedian and podcaster Mark Maron actually did a comedy bit in his latest special about his girlfriend who died. He said he started thinking of the bit pretty much right after it happened. And that's like not something normal people can relate to. He had to wait a long time before he could even break the joke out because he knew that was kind of the only appropriate way to do it. But that's how these weird-ass comedians think. The second thing that drives you crazy is the routine of being a comedian. When I say comedian stand-up, most people think the big-name people that you see on the Netflix and HBO specials. But most comedians are the ones working in local clubs and restaurants and getting by doing multiple gigs a week. Even the big comedians actually do multiple gigs a week. It's called refining your act. And the thing that drives you nuts about it is that when you're a local comedian, you go to the same clubs and see the same people doing the same routine every night. It's like insanity. I remember at a certain point, I was in the back room waiting for a friend of mine to finish his routine, and someone turned to me and like, one of these nights, we should just do each other's routines. You might think that comedians just have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bits and jokes that they do, and they might, but for the most part, you're generally just honing each set night after night after night. You'll change a word here, a line there, just to see how the audience responds. So basically, you can go up 3 nights in a row and do pretty much the same routine, just changing a little bit to see if it'll work a little better, all to get the perfect laugh from the audience. You have to be a little off-kilter to be able to handle basically the same thing every night, again and again and again and again and again. And the third thing is the pay. Now, nobody thinks that they make enough money in their profession, but when I actually started making some headway in the business, or I thought I was making some headway, and I started getting requested instead of just doing open mic nights, I was shocked at the pay. One of the first times I was requested to do a gig, I was living in the Boston area and I was asked to come down to Cape Cod to do a festival. It was a small set, there was a large group of comedians, and I was gonna have a 10-minute set. And take a wild guess as to how much a comedian would make for a 10-minute set. $50! They were gonna give me $50 to perform a routine that I'd spent about 3 months or more of my time perfecting on, and they weren't even gonna give me a drink ticket. Oh, and speaking of drink tickets, a lot of the time when you're really starting out, they won't let you come unless you promise that you bring people with you. They don't necessarily care if they laugh at your jokes or make a good audience. What they want is for them to drink booze. There's generally always a drink minimum when you go to these comedy shows. You have to drink, or at least pay for usually 2 drinks. So sometimes you basically need to give your friends some drinking money and say, hey, just come to the show and watch the routine that I've done 5,000 times in the past 3 months, but come watch it just so I can get into this club this night. Now, technically, this isn't really all that different from the other career I was developing at the same time and continued on, voice acting. I mean, it took me 5 years to make my first dollar as a voice actor, so technically the $50 I made as a stand-up was a little faster, but it took me about 10 years before I started to really make any money voice acting at all. But the difference is, at least I just got to sit in this room and I didn't have to take big long trips and go all over the place and beg my friends to come watch and get booze money for the club. Stand-up is a grind. You have to think like a crazy person, do things like a crazy person, and not get paid for a long time. I mean, the payoffs, similar to the job that I'm in now, when you're at the bottom of the barrel, you're not making any money. But if you get to the top, if you get a Netflix special, HBO special, or you're doing, if you're headlining something in Vegas, or even get some decent shows around the country, yeah, there's some pretty good money in it. But I think you literally have to be a crazy person to do that as your main living.